in largeness of a fine white sheet, and put it then in bed, when all watched all night with their lord, and spent sighs on the dead. Then Jove asked Juno if at length she had... Then Jove asked Juno if at length she had sufficed her spleen, Achilles being won to arms, or if she had not been the natural mother of the Greeks, she did so still prefer their quarrel. She, incensed, asked why he was still incensed. Then Jove asked Juno if at length she had sufficed her spleen, Achilles being won to arms, or if she had not been the natural mother of the Greeks, she did so still prefer their quarrel. She, incensed, asked why he was... She, incensed, asked why he was still taunting her for doing good to those she loved. Since man to man might show kind offices. Through thrall to death. Though thrall to death, and though they did not know half such deep counsels as disclosed beneath her far-seeing state, she, reigning queen of goddesses, and being ingenerate of one stock with himself, besides the state of being his wife. And must her wrath and ill to Troy continue such a strife from time to time? Twixt him and her? This private speech they had. And now the silver-footed queen and her ascent... This private speech they had. And now the silver-footed queen had her ascension made. And now the silver-footed queen had her ascension made to that incorruptible house, that starry golden court of fiery Vulcan, beautiful amongst the immortal sort, which yet the lame god built himself. She found him in a sweat about his bellows, and in haste had 20 tripods beat to set for stools about the sides of his well-builded hall, to whose feet little wheels of gold he put to go withal, and enter his rich dining room alone, their motion free, and back again to go out alone. Miraculous to see. And thus much he had done of them, yet handles were to add, for which he now was making studs. And while their fashion had employment of his skilful hand, bright Thetis was come near, whom first well-haired Charis saw, that was the nuptial fear of famous Vulcan, who the hand of Thetis took and said, all right, let's get a Charis note for Charis's voice here. It's 25 0. Okay. The hand of Thetis took and said, Why, fair-trained, loved and honored dame, why, fair-trained, loved and honored dame, are we thus? Why, fair-trained, loved and honored dame, are we thus visited by your kind presence? Youth, your kind presence. You, I think, were never here before. Come near, that I may banquet you and make you visit more. That I may banquet you and make you visit more. And make you visit more. She led her in, and in a chair of silver, being the fruit of Vulcan's hand, she made her sit, a footstool of a suit opposing to her crystal feet, and called the god of fire, for Thetis was arrived, she said, opposing to her crystal feet, and called the god of fire, for Thetis was arrived, she said, and entertained desire of some grace in his art, that his art might grant. Let's pull our Vulcan voice. Believe it, these words will breed wounds. Some grace that his art might grant. Thetis to me, said he, is mighty and most reverend, as one that nourished me when grief consumed me, being cast from heaven by want of shame in my proud mother, who, because she brought me forth so lame, would have me made away, and then, had I been much distressed, had Thetis and Eurynome in either silver breast not rescued me. Eurynome that to her father had reciprocal Oceanus. 9 years with them I made a number of well-arted things, round bracelets, buttons brave, whistles, and carcanets. Ooh, never seen that word before. If I search it on Google, it comes up with this translation of the Iliad. Right? Let's search it a little bit more deeply. Carcanet, an ornamental necklace, chain, collar, or headband. Carquenet. I think it's fine that I'm pulling a spelling that is Carcanet, but it's got to be the same thing. Carcanet. Buttons brave, whistles, and carcanets. My forge stood in a hollow cave. Hold on, I gotta put this website away. It's like one of those dictionary websites, but the auto ads are like moving around. Round bracelets, buttons brave, whistles, and well-arted things. Round bracelets, buttons brave, whistles, and carcanets. My forge stood in a hollow cave, about which, murmuring with foam, the unmeasured ocean was ever beating. My abode known nor to God nor man, but Thetis and Eurynome. To God nor man, but Thetis and Eurynome. And they would see me still, they were my loving guardians. Now then, the starry hill and our particular roof, thus graced with bright-haired Thetis here. Now then, the starry hill and our particular roof, thus graced with bright-haired Thetis here. It fits me always to repay a recompense as dear to her a recompense as dear to her thoughts as my life to me. Haste, Caris, and oppose some dainty guest rites to our friend, while I my bellows loose from fire and lay up all my tools. Then from an anvil rose the unwieldy monster, halted down, and all awry he went. He took his bellows from the fire, and every instrument locked safe in a bellows from the fire, and every instrument locked safe. Bellows from the fire, and every instrument locked safe up in a silver chest. Bellows from the fire, and every instrument locked safe up in a silver chest. Then with a sponge he dressed his face all over, neck and hands, and all his hairy breast, put on his coat, his scepter took, and then went halting forth, handmaids of gold attending him, resembling in all worth living young damsels, filled with minds and wisdoms, and were trained in all immortal ministry, virtue and voice contained, and immortal ministry, virtue and voice contained, and move with voluntary powers. And these still waited on their fiery sovereign, who, not apt to walk, sate near the throne of fair-haired Thetis, took her hand, and thus he courted her. For what a fair, O fair trained queen, reverend to me and dear, is our court honored with thy state. Thou hast not heretofore performed this kindness. Honored with thy state, that hast not heretofore performed this kindness. Speak thy thoughts, thy suit can be no more than my mind gives me charge to grant. Can my power get it wrought, or that it have not only power of only act in thought? Or that it have not only power of only act in thought? Get it wrought, or that it have not only power of only act in thought? She thus. All right, need Thetis' voice. Why weeps my son? What grieves thee? Speak, conceal not. Only act in thought. She thus. O Vulcan, is there one of all that are of heaven, that in her never quiet mind Saturnius hath given so much affliction as to me, whom only he subjects of all the sea nymphs to a man, and makes me bear the effects of his frail bed, and all against the freedom of my will, and he worn to his root with age. From him another ill ariseth to me. Jupiter, you know, hath given a son, the excellentest of men, to me, whose education on my part well hath answered his own worth, having grown as in a fruitful soil, a tree that puts up not up alone his body to a naked height, but jointly gives his growth 1,000 branches. Yet to him so short a life I brought, that never I shall see him more return to Peleus' court. And all that short life he hath spent in most unhappy sort. For first he won a worthy dame, and had her by the hands of all the Grecians. Yet this dame Atrides countermands, for which... Hold on, let's pull this voice again. Why weeps my son? Of all the Grecians, yet this dame Atrides countermands, for which in much disdain he mourned, and almost pined away. And yet for this wrong he received some honor, I must say. The Greeks, being shut up at their ships, not suffered to advance a head out of their battered sterns, and mighty suppliants by all their grave men hath been made, gifts, honors, all proposed for his reflection. Yet he still kept close, and saw enclosed their whole host in this general plague. But now his friend put on his arms, being sent by him to field, and many a Myrmidon in conduct of him. All the day they fought before the gates of Sia, and most certainly that day had seen the dates of all Troy's honors in her dust. If Phoebus, having done much mischief more, the envied life of good Menetius' son, had not with parted hands enforced, and all the honor given to Hector, who hath prized his arms. And therefore I am driven to embrace thy knees for new defence to my loved son. Alas, his life prefixed so short a date, had needs spend that with grace. A shield then for him, and a helm, fair greaves and curets, such as may renown thy workmanship, and honor him as much I sue for at thy famous hands. Be confident. Believe it, these words. At thy famous hands. Be confident, said he, let these wants breed thy thoughts no care. It would lay in me to hide in him from his no care. I would lay it in me to hide him from his heavy death when fate shall seek for him. I would lay it in me to hide him from his heavy death when fate shall seek for him, as well as with renowned arms to fit his goodly limb, which thy hand shall convey to him, and all eyes shall admire. See, and desire again to see thy satisfied desire. This said, he left her there, and forth did to his bellows go. Opposed them to the fire again, commanding them to blow. Through 20 holes. This said, he left her there, and forth did to his bellows go. Opposed them to the fire again, commanding them to blow. Through 20 holes made to his hearth at once blew 20 pair, that fired his coals, sometimes with soft, sometimes with vehement air. That fired his coals, sometimes with soft, sometimes with vehement air. As he willed, and his work required. Amidst the flames he cast tin, silver, precious gold, and brass, and in the stock he placed a mighty anvil. His right hand a weighty hammer held, his left his tongs. Mighty anvil. His right hand a weighty hammer held, his left his tongs. And first he forged a strong and spacious shield, adorned with 20 several hues, about whose verge he beat a ring. About whose verge he beat a ring. About whose verge he beat a ring, threefold and radiant, and on the back he set a handle. And on the back he set a silver handle. Fivefold were the equal lines he drew about the whole circumference. Fivefold were the equal lines he drew about the whole circumference, in which his hand did shew, directed with a knowing mind, a rare variety. For in it he presented earth, in it the sea and sky, in it the never-wearied sun, the moon exactly round, and all the stars with which the brows of ample heaven are crowned, Orion, all the Pleiades, and those seven Atlas got, the close-beamed Hyades, the bear, surnamed the chariot, that turns about heaven's axle-tree, holds ope a constant eye upon Orion, and of all the crosets in the sky, his golden forehead never bows to the ocean empery. 2 cities in the spacious field he built, with goodly state of diverse languaged men. The one did nuptials celebrate, observing at them solemn feasts. The brides from forth their bowers with torches ushered through the streets, a world of paramours excited by them. Youths and maids in lovely circles danced, to whom the merry pipe and harp their spiritly sounds advanced, the matrons standing in their doors admiring. Otherwhere a solemn court of law was kept, where throngs of people were. The case in question was a fine imposed on one that slew the friend of him that followed it, and for the fine did sue, which the other pleaded he had paid. The adverse part denied, and openly affirmed he had no penny satisfied. Both put it to arbitrament. The people cried 'twas best for both parts, and the assistants too gave their dooms like the rest. The heralds made the people peace. The senators then did peace. The seniors then did bear the people peace. The seniors then did bear the voiceful herald scepters, sat within a sceptred sphere on polished stones, and gave by turns their sentence. In the court 2 talents gold were cast for him that judged in justice sort. The other city wars employed as busily. 2 armies, glittering in arms, of one confederacy besieged it, and a parley with those within the town. And with those within the town. 2 ways they stood resolved to see the city overthrown, or that the citizens should heap in 2 parts all their wealth and give them half. They neither liked, but armed themselves by stealth. Left all their old men, wives, and boys. They neither liked, but armed themselves by stealth. Left all their old men, wives, and boys behind to man their walls, and stole out to their enemy's town. The Queen of Marshals and Mars himself conducted them, both which, being forged of gold, must needs have golden furniture, and men might so behold they were present, and men might so behold they were presented deities. They were presented deities. The people Vulcan forged of meaner metal. When they came where that was to be urged, for which they went, within a vale close to a flood, whose stream used to give all their cattle drink, they there ambushed them, and sent 2 scouts out to descry when the enemy's herds and sheep were setting out. They straight came forth with two that used to keep their passage always, both which piped and went on merrily, nor dreamed of ambuscados there. Ambuscados. And of meaner metal. When they came where that was to be urged, for which they went, within a vale close to a flood, whose stream used to give all their cattle drink, there they ambushed them, and sent 2 scouts out to descry when the enemy's herds and sheep were setting out. They straight came forth with two that used to keep their passage always, both which piped and went on merrily, nor dreamed of ambuscados there. The ambush then let fly, slew all their white-fleeced sheep, and by them laid their guard. When those in siege before the town so strange an uproar heard behind amongst their flocks and herds, being then in council set, they then start up, took horse, and soon their subtle enemy met, fought with them on the river's shore, where both gave mutual blows with well-piled darts. Amongst them all perverse contention rose, amongst them tumult was enraged, amongst them ruinous fate had her red finger. Some they took in an unhurt estate, some hurt yet living, some quite slain, and those they tugged to them by both the feet, stripped off and took their weeds, with all the stream of blood upon them that their steels had manfully let out. They fared as men alive indeed, drew dead indeed about. To these the fiery artisan did add a new-eared field, large and thrice ploughed, the soil being soft and of a wealthy yield. And many men at plough he made, that drave the earth here and there, and turned up stitches orderly, at whose end when they were, a fellow ever gave their hands full cups of luscious wine, which emptied for another stretch the earth they undermine, and for another stretch, which emptied for another stitch the earth they undermine. And long till the utmost bound be reached of all the ample close, the soil turned up behind the plough, all black like earth arose, though forged of nothing else but gold, and lay in show as light as if it had been ploughed indeed, miraculous to sight. There grew by this field of corn There grew by this field of corn, high, ripe, where reapers wrought, and let There grew by this a field of corn, high, ripe. There grew by this a field of corn, high, ripe, where reapers wrought, and let thick handfuls fall to earth, for which some other brought bands and made sheaves. 3 binders stood, and took the handfuls reaped from boys that gathered quickly up, and by them armfuls heaped. Amongst these at a furrow's end the king stood pleased at heart, said no word, but his scepter showed, and from him much apart his harvest bailiffs underneath an oak. A feast prepared, and, having killed a mighty ox, stood there to see him shared, which women from their harvest folks then come to sup had dressed, and many white wheat cakes bestowed to make it up a feast. He set near this a vine of gold that cracked beneath the weight of bunches black with being ripe, to keep which at the height a silver rail ran all along, and round about it flowed an azure moat, and to this guard a quickset was bestowed of tin, one only path to all, by which the pressmen came in time of vintage. Youths and maids that bore not yet the flame of manly hymen, baskets bore of grapes and mellow fruit. A lad that sweetly touched a harp, to which his voice did suit, centered the circles of that youth, all whose skill could not do the wanton's pleasure to their minds, that danced, sung, whistled too. All whose skill could not do the wanton's pleasure to their minds, that danced, sung, whistled too. A herd of oxen then he carved, with high raised heads, forged all of tin. Forged all of gold and tin, for color mixed, and bellowing from their stall, rushed to their pastures at a flood that echoed all their throats, exceeding swift, and full of reeds, and all in yellow coats. 4 herdsmen followed, after whom 9 mastiffs went, in head of all the guard upon a bull that deadly bellowed. 2 horrid lions ramped, and seized, and tugged off, bellowing still. Both men and dogs came, yet they tore the hide, and lapped their fill of black blood, and the entrails ate. After whom 9 mastiffs went, in head of all the herd, upon a bull that deadly bellowed. 2 horrid lions ramped, and seized, and tugged off, bellowing still. Both men and dogs came, yet they tore the hide, and lapped their fill of black blood. And the entrails ate. In vain the men essayed to set their dogs on, none durst pinch, but cur-like stood and bayed in both the faces of their kings, and all their onsets fled. Then in a passing pleasant vale the famous artisan fed, upon a goodly pasture ground, rich flocks of white-fleeced sheep, built stables, cottages, and cotes that did the shepherds keep. From that did the shepherds keep from wind and weather. Next to these he cut a dancing place, all full of turnings, that was like the admirable maze for fair-haired Ariadne, made by cunning Daedalus. All full of turnings, that was like the admirable maze for fair-haired Ariadne, made by cunning Daedalus. And in Daedalus. Let's just check that I'm going with Daedalus for this. Yeah. Because you could do Daedalus as well, I guess. Ariadne, made by cunning Daedalus. And in it youths and virgins danced, all young and beauteous, and glued in an... And in it youths and virgins danced, all young, and in it youths and virgins danced, all young and beauteous, and glued in another's palms. Weeds that the wind did toss the virgins wore, the youths' woven coats that cast a faint dim gloss like that of oil. Fresh garlands too the virgins' temples crowned, the youths' gilt swords wore at their thighs, with silver baldricks bound. Sometimes all wound close in a ring, to which as fast they spun as any wheel a turner makes, being tried how it will run while he is set, and out again as full of speed they wound while he is set. And out again, as full of speed they wound, not one left fast or breaking hands. A multitude stood round, delighted with their nimble sport, to end which two begun, midst all. Delighted with their nimble sport, to end which two begun, midst all a song and turning sung the sport's conclusion. All this he circled in the shield, with pouring round about in all his rage the ocean, that it might never out. This shield thus done, he forged for him such curates as outshined the blaze of fire. A helmet then, through which no steel could find forced passage, he composed, whose hue 100 colors took, and in the crest a plume of gold, that each breath stirred he stuck. And in the crest a plume of gold, that each breath stirred he stuck. All done he to Thetis brought, and held all up to her. All done he all to Thetis brought, and held all up to her. She took them all, and like the hawk surnamed the offspringer, from Vulcan to her mighty son, with that so glorious show, stooped from the steep Olympian hill, hid in eternal snow. From Vulcan to her mighty son, with that so glorious show, stooped from the steep Olympian hill, hid in eternal snow. Surnamed the offspringer, from Vulcan. All done he all to Thetis brought, and held up all to her. She took them all, and like the hawk, and like to the hawk surnamed the offspringer, from Vulcan to her mighty son, with that so glorious show, stooped from the steep Olympian hill, hid in eternal snow. stooped from the steep Olympian hill, stooped from the steep Olympian hill, hid in eternal snow. Hid in eternal snow.